A year and a half ago, I did the unthinkable. I moved from Boise, Idaho to Los Angeles, California. Now, if you live in California or maybe on one of the coasts, you might be thinking, that's actually very thinkable. I would understand why somebody would move from Idaho to California, but you'd be surprised. There's this perception that California is awful. And the perception is kind of accurate. You may have formed this perception as a result of the political leanings of the state, or the housing crisis in the state, the homelessness problems in the state, affordability. There's a lot of reasons why California gets a bad rep, and many of them are true. And even if you're from California and you're like, life is great here, you can't argue that the state's image has suffered. So let's figure out what's going on, why California is so bad, and what we can do to fix it. Now, this video is not just trash talking California. If you look around, it's a beautiful state with nice people, great food, great weather. There's a lot to like, but there's also a lot to dislike. For example, California has the 5th highest rate of homelessness. It has the 2nd most expensive housing behind Hawaii, which is like an island paradise. It has the 5th worst income inequality, the worst air quality, the 5th longest average commute time. U.S. News ranks it as having the 12th worst K-12 education system. But like I said, the weather's nice, right? Beaches, so does it even out? No. No, those problems are real. I face them as somebody with a solid job. I can't afford a house. I can barely afford rent in a lot of places. Now, on the good side, California does have a lot of benefits besides just the weather. It's got really well-paying jobs, the 5th highest median income. There's also a lot of intangible benefits, things like art and culture. The landscapes are very nice. If you have a band that you like and they're going on tour, they're going to stop in California. They're going to stop in LA and San Francisco and probably other places too. There's also something in the air here. It's just got the California dreaming mindset. You got Silicon Valley, Hollywood, even going back all the way to the gold rush. There's this California dream. And it does still feel like it's here, but it feels like it's dying. For the past few decades, more Americans have moved out of California than in. All of California's population growth has been attributed to births within the state or immigration from other countries. But obviously it hasn't always been like that. Every single year from 1950 to 1959, the population of California grew by more than 3% annually. That's crazy. That's 5 million people just in the 50s moved to California. That's the entire population of the state of Florida at that time. It was unprecedented growth, and all the cities were just expanding and suburbanizing. By 1962, California was the most populous U.S. state, and 50 years prior, it hadn't even been in the top 10. As you might expect, all the growth was unsustainable. In Southern California, places like the Inland Empire and Orange County filled up with suburban dwellings, and people had to move to Lancaster and Palmdale. Up in the Bay Area, the whole San Francisco, the peninsula got filled up down through Silicon Valley, San Jose, all the way down into places like Salinas and Gilroy and Stockton. The state filled up in terms of suburbanites spreading out. There's no density, of course. It's all single-family homes, but that's kind of what people want. And as a matter of fact, in the 1970s, when the growth rate was starting to slow down, Californians, they decided to just close the door behind them. They enacted the People's Initiative to limit property taxation, also known as Prop 13. Prop 13 was simple. Your property taxes were limited at 1% of your house's value, and they could only grow by 2% per year. Most importantly, if the value of your house went up, your property taxes didn't go up because they only change when you sell the house. You don't want some old person who moved into their house and is stuck on a fixed income like Social Security. You don't want them being pushed out because their property taxes go up because their house value goes up, right? They don't benefit from the house value going up. So why are they paying the property taxes? They just want to live. And that's not a bad idea. Keeping property taxes low makes homeownership more affordable. But it had some unintended consequences. Namely, property tax revenue began to fall. Of course it did. And as a result, the state had to raise money elsewhere, namely in sales tax, which California has one of the highest, and income tax, which California has one of the highest. Additionally, even after Prop 13 was signed, people still wanted to move to California. And so homeowners now didn't want to sell, because when you sell your home and you buy a new one, your property taxes are probably going to go up. And as a result of that, supply of housing went down and prices continued to go up. It's just basic economics. Now, expensive housing helps explain why the rate of homelessness is so high in California. Prop 13 also contributes to income inequality, though, because homeowners can transfer their houses to their children and their grandchildren without reassessing the tax value, which is pretty crazy, and it can lead to some ridiculous situations. Like this house in Cupertino, which despite only being worth about double its neighbor, pays over 40 times more in property taxes, simply because the owners of one house have been living there longer than the owners of the other house. So why don't you change it? Why don't you fix Prop 13? Well, you can't do that, right? Because most Californians are homeowners, and nobody's going to vote for a bill that's going to increase their taxes, especially their property taxes. Prop 13 reform is hugely unpopular. And even if you do manage to repeal it, do you get rid of all the problems in California? Probably not, right? I mean, look at Oregon and Hawaii. These are two states with high homelessness rates, pretty expensive housing, and yet they don't have Prop 13, right? Except Oregon does have its own version of Prop 13. It's called Measure 50. And Hawaii has the lowest property taxes in the country to begin with. I'm sorry guys, this video was clickbait. It's not really a video about why California sucks. It's a video about why the way we tax people in America sucks. But stay with me and I'll fix California's problems as well as every other state in the country. Let's get started. Most of your taxes come in one of three forms. Income tax, which you pay on the money you make. Property tax, which you pay on the value of your home. And sales tax, which you pay on the items you buy. All three of these taxes suck, and I'm going to explain why, starting with sales tax, because that one's the worst. Let's say you want to buy a $50 pair of sneakers, and there's a 10% sales tax. Maybe you'd happily buy them if they were $50, but now they're $55, and that's just a little too much for you, so you decide to wait, hold off, you're not going to buy the shoes for now, right? From the store's perspective, they're still selling the shoes for $55, but they have to give $5 of it to the government. This might make it less appealing for the store to even sell the shoes to begin with, right? There's less demand now. So in simple terms, because of sales tax, you might not buy the sneakers, the store might not sell the sneakers, and as a result, less joy for you in the form of new sneakers and less profit for the store. This is what economists call deadweight loss. It's missed opportunities for you, the consumer, and them, the producer, all because of sales tax. Can you believe this? They knew I was filming today. The same thing happens with income tax, right? You lose a portion of your income to the government, and you're less likely to work as many hours because your time may be more valuable spent doing something else, like caring for your child, for example. Not a bad thing, but it doesn't contribute or boost the economy, so economists are not really favorable towards income taxes. Property taxes are a bit better at preventing deadweight loss, but it still happens, right? Most property taxes in the US are levied based on the value of your land, as well as the value of the house on the land. Let's say you own a pretty profitable parking lot in the downtown of a city. There are office buildings around and the workers pay good money to park at your lot. Because you have nothing substantial built up on the property, your taxes are a lot lower than the surrounding buildings. You have less of an incentive to make your land more productive because if you were to put a new building there or a big parking garage or something, your taxes are going to go up. The difference with property tax is that this deadweight loss can be solved. Instead of taxing the value of the land and the building on it, just tax the value of the land. Welcome to the world of land value tax. LVT is not a new idea. As a matter of fact, Adam Smith, the first modern economist, wrote about it in The Wealth of Nations all the way back in 1776. About 100 years later, a man named Henry George took the concept and ran with it. His book, which you may not have even heard of, is called Progress and Poverty. It took America by storm, and in the 1890s, only the Bible outsold it in the United States. People loved the book. Albert Einstein, Leo Tolstoy, H.G. Wells, Winston Churchill, Bertrand Russell, all of them were fans of Henry George. George's arguments centered around the fact that the supply of land is fixed. You can't create new land easily. And because of this, the value of land is based solely on the price tenants are willing to pay. So how does it work in practice? Let me explain, and credit to Chuck Marone for this explanation, it's great. Here we have 4 hypothetical pieces of land, all next to each other. 2 are vacant lots and 2 have houses on them. All 4 of these parcels have a land value of $100,000 and the buildings are worth an additional $300,000. In the current property tax system, these 2 parcels are worth $100,000 and these 2 are worth $400,000. That adds up to a total value of $1 million. If we're using a 1% property tax system, the vacant lots pay $1,000 annually and the houses pay $4,000. If we instead move to a land value tax of 2.5%, we now have a total land value of $400,000 and each parcel pays $2,500. You can now immediately see how land value tax makes sense. It benefits those who do things with their land, who make value. So you might be asking, what does this have to do with fixing California? How does this fix the housing crisis? How does this fix commute times? How does this fix homelessness, right? Let's explain. In the immediate short term, it wouldn't do much. It would certainly light a fire under those who own prime real estate and choose not to do anything with it, though. Their tax bills would go up, and as a result, they would either have to sell their land to somebody who will do something with it, or do something productive with it, like build more housing. Building housing increases the supply, which lowers the cost. Again, simple economics. It would also encourage property owners to seek out zoning reform. Single-family homes are not an efficient use of prime real estate. Way out in the suburbs, sure, that's fine. But if you're close to downtown, that is not the best way to use the land. And so neighborhoods that are zoned to only allow single-family homes will face pressure to allow higher density housing options. Now, if you're a homeowner watching this, you might be asking, will my taxes go up? And that depends, right? Do you live on a particularly valuable parcel of land that's not being used efficiently? Then yes, your taxes will most likely go up. This is the price that you should have to pay for occupying a prime piece of land and not taking full advantage of it, right? And if you're willing to pay it, that's great. No harm there. You can use the land however you want. But if you live in a typical suburban home, maybe on the outskirts of the city, or if you live in a high-rise apartment downtown, your taxes probably wouldn't go up. They might even go down. As for renters, you may be concerned because if there was a land value tax that caused your landlord's cost to go up, would your rent also go up? This is a pretty intuitive thought, right? If the taxes on vegetables go up, then your bill at a restaurant is probably going to go up because they have to pay more for vegetables. But rent works a little differently, right? Because landlords already charge the market rate. And most landlords, if they could charge you more money, they would. Now, you might have a really great landlord who doesn't increase your rent, but that is not typical. If your landlord tries to pass it on to you, you could just move to a unit where they're using the land more efficiently and where their property taxes might have even gone down, right? You have that power as a renter, and that landlord has no control over you. At least in theory. Obviously, this is all just economist speak, right? What makes the most sense on paper? But in practice, land value tax also makes sense, right? The key is to just phase it in over the course of 10 or maybe 20 years, right? This would allow elders, people on Social Security, to live out their golden years in their house, and slowly over time, people would adjust. Land value tax would take place, right? And if they want to move, they have time to move. Now, if you're a conservation-minded person, you may be concerned that land value tax will create overdevelopment, right? You're going to have these huge, tall apartment buildings everywhere because they're the most efficient. You're going to start chopping down forests to build more apartments, but this wouldn't actually happen, right? If you live in a city, most parks or natural areas are owned by the city anyways. Nobody has the option to develop those now if they wanted to. And an increase in land value tax would not encourage urban sprawl, right? Because suburban land use is less efficient. People are going to want to build in dense downtown areas where it's more profitable now. Okay, you might be saying, but what about farmers, right? They own thousands and thousands of acres of land. A land value tax would really hurt them. But farmers don't generally own land that is super high value. They own land in rural areas where taxes are already low, and so land value tax wouldn't have a huge impact on most farmers. The only ones who would get hit are the ones who choose to farm close to big cities, which is such an inefficient use of land and such a rarity that I think it's worth it. Would this cause the average person's taxes to increase? Probably not. Now, when Henry George wrote about land value tax in his book, Progress and Poverty, he was writing it back in the 1800s when there wasn't really income tax or sales tax or capital gains. And so he wrote that we should use land value tax as a single tax. And you'll see some people still use this today. They want to replace all taxes with land value tax. And maybe that's something that's possible in the future. Land value tax is super efficient. But I think right now, if there's an increase in revenue from land value tax, we should simply pass it on to the people by lowering income tax and lowering sales tax because those are not efficient. Additionally, it's not crazy to think that all you need is a property tax. Look at New Hampshire. New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax or a sales tax, and it doesn't even have the highest property tax rates in the country. And New Hampshire is a great place to live, as you can see from all these statistics over here, okay? So yes, you can have a single tax, and yes, it can be land value tax if you do it right. Land value tax would encourage more units of housing to be built, reducing strain on California's tight housing supply. It would decrease urban sprawl and encourage farmers to be more efficient with their land, which would help alleviate the state's water crisis. It would increase density, which would lower commute times. It would encourage public transit, which would further reduce traffic and help air quality, things like smog. It would make first-time homeownership easier, which would allow people to stop renting and begin investing their income, which in turn would help reduce income inequality. So, if we've known about land value tax for so long and it's this perfect solution, why haven't we tried it already? Why don't we have land value tax everywhere? What's the catch? Well, we have tried land value tax. In the 1980s, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania was facing serious problems. It was a prime example of Rust Belt deindustrialization. The city had over 4,200 vacant structures and it was about to go bankrupt. And so the mayor decided to institute a form of land value tax. Essentially, 33% property tax, 66% land value tax, right? Most of your taxes for properties were based on the value of the land. What happened was, 20 years later, the number of vacant structures dropped to under 500. The downtown became revitalized, the city's shrinking population began to stabilize, and nearly 20 cities in Pennsylvania have a similar system. One of those cities is Altoona, Pennsylvania, home of Altoona Pizza. I don't know. Altoona instituted a split tax rate like Harrisburg in 2002, but then in 2011, they ramped it up. They went full land value tax. What happened? Actually, not too much. This is because city property taxes accounted for only 1/4 of the total property tax bills for city residents. The rest of taxes were for the school system and for the county, and both were, again, standard property tax. And so, as a result, Altoona hasn't changed much since 2012. And this is the biggest issue with land value tax, which is that it's hard to implement it. In order to do it from the ground up, you have to reform things like how we fund our schools, how we fund our roads, where counties and states and cities get their money. And that takes a long time, and it takes rewriting the tax code, which is crazy. The US tax code is thousands of pages long, and then there are state, county, municipal tax codes to match, right? It's all so convoluted and messy, and that complexity allows for rich and powerful people to avoid paying taxes. One of the most common ways to avoid taxes is for rich people to move their assets offshore. You can't move land offshore. And so politically influential, wealthy people, they don't want tax reform. What's cool about land value tax to me, though, is that it's pretty bipartisan. It's fair and it's a flat tax, so conservatives like it, but also it's not regressive, and it helps people who are trying to build wealth and enter society, so liberals like it too. It also creates structural change, and so political outsiders, your RFK voters, they like it too. The biggest obstacle, besides the tax reform itself, is that most people just don't know land value tax is an option. So hopefully this video is a video you can send to your weird uncle to get him on board, and if you have any questions about land value tax, just comment them below and I'll try to answer them. Thanks for watching. Alright, this will be a pretty short appendix. I don't really have too many notes. Most of the rankings, like for New Hampshire, and some of the stats came from US News and World Report, which relatively good source. Not my favorite, but that's okay. As far as further reading, obviously Progress and Poverty by Henry George is a good start. There's also plenty of articles out there and video explainers if you want to get more into the economics of it or into the practicality of how do you implement this. There's a dedicated community of Georgists. That's people who like land value tax online. They're easy to find. We are a vocal minority. I have a bumper sticker on my car about this. It's pretty dry. It's hard to get people engaged. I don't know if this video was that good, but you know, we'll see what the feedback is. I just like posting, just trying to post as much as I can with a full-time job and all that stuff. So thanks again. And let me know if you have any questions. I'll be in the comments for sure. So because of sales tax, oh my goodness, squirrels. What's up, brother? You guys didn't see me? Keep going. Where did I leave off? They're trying to get free advertising in my video. High noon, you gotta pay me to do a promotion, okay? Censor that. These squirrels are let me show you these squirrels. Oh, he jumped into the bushes when he saw me move. Crazy.